The leather journal felt ice-cold in Natalie's trembling hands, as she sat hunched in the driver's seat of her mother's silver Honda, at exactly 11:47 p.m. exactly 12 hours, and 13 minutes remained before she was scheduled to walk down a flower-lined aisle and become Mrs. Robert Coleman. The hotel parking lot stretched out vast and silent, virtually empty save for a few scattered sedans, while the flickering yellow glow of a tall overhead streetlight cast long, sickly shadows across the handwritten pages. She now wished with every fiber of her being she had never opened. March 15th, the delicate, familiar cursive read. He kissed me today. I know it is terribly wrong, but Robert makes me feel alive again in ways I haven't felt since Natalie's father left us years ago. The way he looked at me across the table when she went to the restroom during our Sunday dinner. I think he wants this just as desperately as I do. Natalie's breath hitched violently in her throat as her white-knuckled fingers forced themselves to turn the page. This couldn't possibly be real. It had to be some sick, twisted joke, or perhaps the opening chapter of a romantic fiction novel her mother was secretly drafting. Yet the recent dates staring back at her were far too precise, the personal details far too agonizingly familiar, to be anything other than absolute truth. March 22nd, the next entry detailed. We almost got caught today. Natalie called my cell while Robert was at my house helping me move the heavy furniture in the living room. She wanted to discuss the pastel flower arrangements for the reception tables. I could barely keep my voice steady enough to speak while he was standing behind me, kissing my neck. The guilt is eating me alive, but I simply cannot stop. He tells me he loves us both, just in entirely different ways. The heavy journal slipped from Natalie's numb fingers, dropping to the floor mats with a dull, hollow thud. She leaned her head back against the leather headrest, staring blankly up at the fabric ceiling of her mother's car, trying desperately to process the absolute ruin of her reality. Tomorrow was meant to be the absolute happiest day of her entire life. She had spent 8 exhausting months meticulously planning every minute detail alongside Patricia, her mother, who had insistently volunteered to be intimately involved in every single aspect, every bridal dress fitting, every cake tasting, every single vendor consultation. Now, with a sickening jolt of clarity, the horrifying pieces of the puzzle locked into place. She finally understood why her mother had been so eager to offer help at every turn. She understood why Patricia had consistently suggested Robert go over to help with minor house repairs, and why she had insisted on taking Robert personally to pick out his tuxedo while Natalie was trapped working late shifts at the office. Summoning every ounce of her remaining strength, Natalie leaned down and retrieved the journal, her heart hammering so violently against her ribs that the sound echoed in the quiet cabin. April 5th, read the ink on the following page. Robert confessed today that he is having serious second thoughts about going through with the wedding. He says what we share is genuine, passionate love, not the safe, comfortable companionship he has with Natalie. I told him we cannot do this to her, but the moment he touches me, everything else in the world simply fades away. April 12th, the secret ledger continued. We made love today. Real, passionate love. Nothing like the routine, mechanical intimacy I endured with Natalie's father for decades. Robert insists that Natalie doesn't truly understand him the way I do. We lay together talking for hours after she goes to sleep. She has absolutely no idea that he leaves her apartment and comes back to mine. Natalie's stomach churned with overwhelming nausea. She remembered those specific April nights with agonizing clarity. Robert would kiss her forehead around 9 in the evening, claiming he had crucial early morning corporate meetings to prepare for. She would drift off to sleep alone in her bed, never once questioning why he had seemed so emotionally distant, why their late-night conversations had devolved into shallow small talk, or why their physical connection had withered into a lifeless routine. April 20th, her mother had written. I think Natalie suspects something is off. She asked me why I've been in such extraordinarily high spirits lately. I lied and told her I was just overwhelmed with excitement for her big day. It isn't entirely a lie. I am excited, just not for the reasons she thinks. Robert and I have begun discussing what happens after the ceremony. We both know we cannot keep this secret forever. The deep agony of betrayal sliced through Natalie with every sentence she devoured. This was no impulsive, momentary lapse of judgment. This was a deliberate, calculated affair that had been burning under her nose for months. Her own mother, the woman who had raised her, guided her through heartbreak, and taught her the values of loyalty and honesty, had been sleeping with her fiancé while smilingly helping her organize the wedding. May 3rd, the diary confessed. Robert says he wants to officially call off the wedding. He wants to leave her and be with me permanently. I am 52 years old, and I never dreamed I could feel this level of intensity again. Yet every time I look at my daughter's radiant face while she talks about their future, I am paralyzed with terror. How can I utterly destroy my own child's happiness for my own desire? May 10th, the writing grew erratic, stained with dried water spots. We fought bitterly today. Robert shouted that if I truly loved him, I wouldn't care about hurting Natalie's feelings. I slapped his face. Then I dragged him into a kiss. I hate myself for wanting him this desperately. Natalie showed me the pictures from her final dress fitting this afternoon. She looked so breathtakingly beautiful, so full of pure joy. What kind of monster mother am I? Natalie used the back of her trembling hand to wipe away the silent tears streaming down her burning cheeks. The surrounding hotel parking lot remained dead and silent, yet she felt completely exposed, as if an invisible audience were watching her public humiliation. Suddenly, her cell phone vibrated violently in her lap, illuminating the dark interior with a text notification from Robert. "Can't wait to marry you tomorrow, my beautiful girl. Sweet dreams." A wild urge to hurl the device across the asphalt surged through her, but she forced herself to take a deep, shuddering breath. She returned her gaze to the open pages. May 15th, 3 days until the wedding. Robert came over to the house while Natalie was out at her bachelorette party with her friends. We made love on the living room sofa, the very same sofa where she sits to open her Christmas presents every single year. I am undoubtedly going to hell for this, but when he holds me in his arms, hell feels entirely worth the price. May 17th, tomorrow is the wedding. Robert and I agreed that this madness has to end immediately after tomorrow. We agreed to have one final, passionate night together tonight. After that, we will both try our absolute best to make Natalie happy. I honestly do not know if I can stand there and watch her marry the man I am desperately in love with. I don't know if I can pretend to smile when my heart is breaking into pieces. That was tonight. While Natalie had been surrounded by her laughing bridesmaids at dinner, innocently celebrating her final hours, as a single woman, her mother and her future husband were sharing one last secret encounter. Flipping frantically through the back pages, Natalie found grocery lists, dressmaker receipts, and catering notes haphazardly interwoven with graphic details of the affair. Her mother had maintained a monstrous double life, acting as the devoted matriarch by day and a betrayer by night. The absolute final entry was dated yesterday, May 18th. I helped Natalie with her final bridal preparations today. She was so radiant, so deeply grateful for all my assistance. She kept wrapping her arms around me, telling me I was the most wonderful mother a girl could ever ask for. Robert texted me while she was in the shower, "Tonight. One last time. Then we will make her happy." I despise us both, but I am utterly powerless to stay away from him. Natalie snapped the leather cover shut and sat frozen in the oppressive darkness. In the hotel above her, her bridal party was peacefully sleeping. In a mere matter of hours, her friends would wake up eager to help her dress. The hair and makeup artists were scheduled for 8 in the morning, the photographer would arrive at 10, and 400 invited guests were set to gather in the Grand Cathedral by 1:30. Her wedding gown was currently hanging in the hotel closet, pristine, expensive, and pure white. The floral arrangements were set, the multi-tiered cake was decorated, and the minister was preparing his sermon on holy matrimony. Everyone in her life was ready for Natalie Williams to become Mrs. Robert Coleman. Everyone except Natalie herself. Starting the Honda's engine, she drove the short distance back to the hotel entrance, the leather journal resting on the passenger seat beside her like physical evidence of a brutal crime. In 12 hours, she would indeed be walking down that church aisle, but not to deliver the sweet vows everyone anticipated. She had developed a far better plan. By 2:17 a.m., Natalie was sitting motionless on the edge of her hotel bed, staring at the white gown hanging against the closet door. In the adjoining room, her 3 bridesmaids slept soundly, exhausted from the festivities. The dress seemed to glow under the faint room light, mocking her gullibility. Her phone had been vibrating continuously, Robert had sent 3 additional messages, and her mother had called twice, likely wondering why her car was missing from the driveway. Natalie had silenced the device, watching the notifications fade into the dark. Standing up, she opened her laptop. If she was going to tear down this illusion tomorrow, she needed indisputable physical evidence. She needed clear, printed copies of the diary entries to ensure there was zero room for frantic denials or elaborate cover-ups. Though the hotel's business center was locked for the night, she recalled passing a wireless print station in the main lobby. Gathering her laptop and the journal, she took the service elevator down. The front desk clerk was nodding off as Natalie quietly operated the printer, outputting page after page of her mother's handwritten confessions. Seeing the intimate words rendered in crisp, jet-black ink somehow made the betrayal feel even more monstrous. Returning to her suite, she organized the pages into neat, distinct stacks. She prepared complete sets for herself, the officiating minister, and the master of ceremonies. She wanted unmistakable proof. She wanted every single person in attendance to comprehend the exact nature of the people they were invited to honor. Her phone screen suddenly brightened with another incoming call from Patricia. Natalie stared at her mother's caller ID, remembering a lifetime of trusting that name. On the 4th ring, she swiped the screen and brought the phone to her ear. "Natalie, honey. Where on earth are you? Where is my car? I've been looking everywhere for it." "I have the car, Mom," Natalie said, keeping her tone flat and measured. "Oh, thank goodness," Patricia let out a breath of relief. "I was getting worried. Are you all right? You sound a bit distant." "I'm completely fine, Mom. Just thinking about tomorrow." A brief pause stretched over the line. "I am so excited for you, sweetheart. You are going to be the most breathtaking bride. Robert is so incredibly lucky to have you." The words tasted like venom. "Yes, he is lucky. Very lucky indeed. You should get some rest, Mom. Tomorrow is going to be a very long day." "Yes, it certainly is. I love you, Natalie." "I love you too, Mom," Natalie replied coldly, ending the call. The lie burned her throat, but she needed Patricia and Robert to enter the sanctuary entirely unsuspecting, fully convinced their dirty secret was safely hidden. Opening the journal once more, Natalie reread a passage from late April that made her jaw clench. April 28, it read. "Robert brought me wildflowers today, not the expensive bouquets he buys for Natalie, but delicate blossoms he picked himself. He told me they reminded him of my free spirit, and that Natalie could never understand that passionate side of him. He said she is far too practical, far too rigidly organized, whereas he needs a woman who matches his fire." Natalie let out a bitter, silent laugh. Too practical. She had been practical enough to trust her own mother implicitly, and organized enough to arrange an elaborate wedding for a man who was actively betraying her. Perhaps being practical was precisely what would save her tonight. She reflected on the subtle red flags she had brushed aside over the past several months. the way Robert habitually flipped his phone face down on dinner tables, his sudden, enthusiastic desire to handle household repairs for Patricia, the abrupt silence that would fall over the room whenever she walked in on the two of them chatting in the kitchen. She had foolishly chalked it all up to pre-wedding stress. She had been patient, loyal, and supportive, everything a devoted partner ought to be, while her mother and her fiancé laughed at her behind closed doors. At 4 a.m., she dialed her older sister, Lauren, who lived in Los Angeles. "Nat? What's going on?" Lauren's groggy voice answered. "It's 4 in the morning over there, it's your wedding day." "I know what day it is, Lauren. I need to ask you something, and I need you to give me a completely honest answer." "Okay, you're making me nervous. Are you sick?" "Lauren, have you ever noticed anything strange or inappropriate between Mom and Robert?" A heavy, prolonged silence stretched over the line. "Strange how?" "Anything. The way they talk, the way they look at each other when they think no one is paying attention." "Nat, why on earth are you asking me this right now? Just answer the question, Lauren. Please." Lauren let out a slow sigh. "Look. I always thought Mom was a little overly obsessed with your relationship. And back at Christmas, I noticed Robert was paying a strange amount of attention to her. But I assumed he was just trying hard to impress his future mother-in-law." "What kind of attention?" "He was constantly complimenting her appearance and her cooking. He spent an hour helping her dry dishes in the kitchen while you were on that work call. He seemed to know surprisingly intimate details about her life, more than I would ever expect a guy to know about his girlfriend's mother." Natalie closed her eyes, feeling a cold wave wash over her. Even her distant sister had sensed the unsettling dynamic. "Nat, seriously, why are you asking me this?" Lauren pressed. "What happened?" "I found something tonight," Natalie said softly. "Something that changes everything." "What did you find?" Natalie glanced at the printed pages stacked neatly beside her gown. "The kind of evidence that guarantees there won't be a traditional wedding today. At least, not the one everyone is expecting." "Natalie, you're terrifying me. What is going on over there? Should I book a flight right now?" "No, stay in California. Trust me, Lauren, you do not want to be physically present for what is going to happen today." She hung up before her sister could interrogate her further. Outside the window, the dark night sky was beginning to soften into pale shades of rose and gold. It promised to be a stunning, clear morning, ideal weather for the grand outdoor reception she and Robert had spent months organizing. Moving with cold, deliberate precision, Natalie showered, styled her hair simply, applied light makeup, and fastened the pearl drop earrings her grandmother had gifted her. They were the sole remaining element of the day that retained any true sentimental value. At 6 a.m., a light knock sounded on the connecting room door. "Rise and shine, beautiful bride," cheered Jessica, her maid of honor. "It's officially your wedding day." Natalie opened the door, a serene smile fixed on her face. "I am completely ready." And she truly was, just not for the celebration they envisioned. By mid-morning, the bridal suite was a flurry of activity. Jessica was carefully steaming the dusty rose bridesmaid dresses, while humming a cheerful tune. Rebecca was organizing the floral bouquets, and Amanda was pouring chilled champagne for the traditional toast. None of them had any inkling that the bride standing among them had spent the night engineering a devastating exposure. "You are shockingly calm, Nat," Jessica remarked, watching Natalie through the vanity mirror, as the stylist finalized her hair. "If it were me, I'd be shaking like a leaf." "I feel immense clarity today," Natalie replied smoothly. "Everything is unfolding precisely as it was meant to." Her phone chimed. Robert's photograph flashed on the screen. She answered instantly, putting her caller on speaker. "Good morning, my future husband." "Good morning, beautiful," Robert's voice echoed warmly into the room. I barely slept a wink last night. I am so overwhelmingly excited to marry you today. Liar, Natalie thought, staring at her reflection. He hadn't slept because he was in her mother's bed. I can hardly wait either, she said aloud. Are you feeling nervous at all? A little, he admitted with a light laugh. It's a massive life commitment. Yes, it certainly is, Natalie responded, her tone dripping with hidden irony. The most profound promise two human beings can make to each other, promising absolute honesty, unwavering loyalty, and total faithfulness. A brief, noticeable pause occurred on his end of the line. Precisely. Those are the foundational pillars of a true marriage. Natalie nearly laughed at the sheer, unadulterated audacity of his words. I couldn't agree more. Mutual trust is everything, isn't it? Absolutely, sweetheart. Without trust, you have nothing at all. I couldn't have said it better myself. I'll see you at the altar, Robert. I love you, Natalie. I love you too, she replied, ending the call. Jessica gave her a curious look through the mirror. That was an awfully intense conversation, for 4 hours before the ceremony. You guys usually just goof around. Today requires a bit more gravity, Natalie said lightly. After all, it is our wedding day. At 10:30 a.m., Patricia swept into the suite, looking radiant in a custom navy blue gown. Her hair was styled to perfection, her makeup flawless. She approached Natalie with open arms, wrapping her daughter in a gentle embrace to avoid rumpling the silk dress. You look like an absolute dream, sweetheart, Patricia gushed, tears glittering in her eyes. A literal princess. Thank you, Mom, Natalie said, studying her mother's glowing face for the slightest tremor of shame. She found absolutely nothing. Patricia was executing her role flawlessly, the proud, devoted mother of the bride. You look magnificent yourself. You're practically glowing. Patricia blushed softly. Oh, thank you, darling. I'm just so endlessly happy for you today. Are you truly, Mom? Of course I am. This is the moment every mother prays for from the day her daughter is born. Reaching into her designer clutch, Patricia produced a small velvet jewelry box. I brought you something special. Something blue for your wedding day. She opened the box to reveal an antique silver bracelet set with a single oval sapphire. This belonged to your grandmother. She wore it when she walked down the aisle, and I wore it when I married your father. I want you to have it. The gesture felt like a physical strike across the face, a sacred family heirloom passed down through generations of faithful women, presented to her by the adulteress, who had spent the previous night in her fiancé's arms. It's striking, Mom, Natalie said, keeping her voice entirely steady. Would you mind clasping it onto my wrist? Patricia's hands were completely steady as she secured the silver latch. If she harbored a single shred of remorse for her actions, she masked it with terrifying expertise. By 11:30 a.m., the bridal party boarded the black stretch limousine bound for St. Catherine's Cathedral. Natalie sat directly between her mother and her maid of honor, holding Patricia's hand as the vehicle navigated the downtown traffic. Her mother's palm was warm and relaxed. Are you truly ready for this big step, my sweet girl? Patricia asked softly, squeezing her fingers. I have never been more ready for anything in my entire life, Natalie answered, staring directly into her mother's eyes. When the limousine pulled up to the grand stone entrance of the cathedral, the surrounding parking lot was already brimming with vehicles. Guests were arriving in waves, relatives, old high school friends, corporate colleagues, and extended family. 400 people had gathered to witness what they believed was a glorious union. They were indeed going to witness an unforgettable event, just not the one they had written on their invitations. Downstairs in the church's private bridal quarters, the wedding coordinator, Mrs. Henderson, bustling about with her clipboard, bustled into the room. Everything upstairs is completely breathtaking, ladies. The floral arches are set, the string quartet is tuning up, and the groom and his party are looking exceptionally sharp. How are we feeling? Completely serene, Natalie replied with a brilliant smile. Everything is proceeding exactly according to plan. At 1 p.m., the official photographer conducted the pre-ceremony portraits. Natalie posed gracefully with her bridal bouquet, flanked by her smiling bridesmaids and her beaming mother. In every single capture, Natalie offered a dazzling, radiant smile, the picture-perfect image of an overjoyed bride. Patricia smoothed Natalie's long lace veil, adjusting the delicate fabric around her shoulders with utmost care. "You are the most breathtaking bride I have ever laid eyes on," Patricia whispered, her eyes brimming with tears. "Thank you for everything, Mom," Natalie murmured, looking her dead in the eye. "For all your immense help throughout this entire process. I truly couldn't have accomplished any of this without your unique contribution. It was my absolute pleasure, darling. I only ever wanted everything to be perfect for you." Perfect, Natalie thought, feeling a cold fire ignite behind her ribs. At 1:45 p.m., Mrs. Henderson knocked firmly on the heavy oak door. "It's time, ladies. Positions, please." Natalie stood before the grand gold mirror, taking one final look at the woman she had been. Her gown cascaded around her in flawless white waves, her grandmother's sapphire bracelet glinted under the lights, and her face was a mask of absolute, icy composure. "Ready, my sweet girl?" Patricia asked, offering her arm. "More ready than I've ever been," Natalie declared. The processional music began to echo from the sanctuary above, the deep, resonant notes of the pipe organ filtering down through the stone ceiling. The bridesmaids straightened their floral bouquets and assumed their positions in the hallway. "Remember your spacing, girls," Mrs. Henderson instructed, monitoring her headset. "Count to 5 slowly between each walk." "Patricia, as discussed, you will be escorting Natalie down the aisle in place of her father." Natalie's biological father had abandoned the family when she was 12 years old, yet another man, who had broken sacred oaths and shattered her trust. How fitting, she realized with dark humor, that the woman who had helped destroy her present would walk her down the aisle to meet the man destroying her future. The massive double doors at the rear of the sanctuary swung wide. One by one, the bridesmaids began their slow, deliberate walk down the long carpeted aisle. Through the archway, Natalie could see the sanctuary filled to capacity. 400 guests stood in quiet anticipation, the wooden pews adorned with white silk ribbons and glowing white candles. "Your turn, lovely ladies," Mrs. Henderson whispered, gesturing forward. Patricia took Natalie's arm, and together they stepped over the threshold into the grand sanctuary. As the pipe organ shifted into the traditional bridal entrance march, the entire congregation rose to their feet as one, turning their heads to catch their first glimpse of the bride. A soft, collective murmur of admiration rippled through the pews. Natalie looked ethereal, composed, and utterly radiant. Patricia beamed with pride, holding her chin high as they began their slow, synchronized march toward the altar. Halfway down the long aisle, Natalie met Robert's gaze. He stood at the altar looking extraordinarily handsome in his fitted black tuxedo, flanked by his groomsmen. Yet as his eyes locked onto hers, a subtle flicker of anxiety crossed his features, his gaze darting nervously to Patricia walking at her side before returning to Natalie. He was undoubtedly remembering the previous night, their final, dirty secret before he assumed the role of faithful husband. Natalie offered him a warm, dazzling smile, giving absolutely no indication of the storm brewing beneath her quiet exterior. In the front pews, she recognized her beloved aunts, her close work colleagues, her college roommates, and Robert's smiling parents. Everyone she held dear was assembled in this room, eager to witness the commencement of her happily ever after. As they reached the foot of the altar steps, the music swelled to its triumphant climax before fading into silence. Robert took a step forward, his smile confident once more. Patricia pressed a soft kiss against Natalie's cheek, lifted her daughter's hand, and gently placed it into Robert's palm, symbolically transferring her daughter to her future husband. "Take good care of my girl," Patricia whispered to him, her voice trembling with emotion. "Always," Robert replied solemnly, though his eyes darted away momentarily. Patricia stepped back and took her designated place of honor in the very first pew, smoothing her navy gown, as she sat back to watch the proceedings. She looked serene, proud, and entirely unbothered by guilt. Natalie stood at the altar facing Robert, holding her bridal bouquet in her left hand while he held her right. He gazed down at her with an expression of profound affection. "You look utterly breathtaking," he whispered beneath his breath. "Thank you," she whispered back smoothly. "You look exceptional as well." The officiating minister, Reverend Williams, raised his hands to quiet the congregation. The 400 guests settled back into their wooden pews, the sanctuary falling into a reverent hush, save for the faint sound of joyful weeping in the back rows. "Dearly beloved," the minister's deep voice echoed throughout the vaulted hall, "we are gathered here today in the presence of God and these witnesses to join Robert Coleman and Natalie Williams in the sacred bond of holy matrimony. Marriage is an honorable estate, not to be entered into unadvisedly or lightly, but reverently, discreetly, and in the fear of God." Natalie stood motionless, listening to the ancient words meant to anchor two lives in lifelong fidelity. Sacred bond. Reverently. Discreetly. The sheer hypocrisy of the scene nearly made her laugh aloud. "If any person present," the minister continued, reaching the traditional solemn inquiry, "can show just cause why these two persons may not lawfully be joined together in holy matrimony, let them speak now, or else hereafter forever hold their peace." The customary, brief silence fell across the room. 400 people held their breath, expecting the minister to proceed to the vows after the standard pause. It was a mere liturgical formality, a relic of ancient traditions that no one ever actually interrupted. Except today. Today, the silence stretched unbroken. Natalie released Robert's hand, took 2 deliberate steps back, and cleared her throat. "Actually," Natalie declared, her clear, ringing voice carrying effortlessly into every corner of the silent cathedral, "I have something to say." A sudden, sharp shock rippled through the sanctuary. 400 guests sat frozen, expressions shifting instantly from joyful expectation to utter bewilderment. This was completely unscripted. Reverend Williams blinked in shock, his ceremonial book hovering open in his hands. Robert's face paled slightly as he reached out for her arm. "Nat? What on earth are you doing? Let's get through the vows." Natalie smoothly stepped out of his reach, creating a wide physical gulf between them at the altar. "I am speaking up now, because the minister asked if anyone knew a reason why we should not be joined in marriage. And I happen to have a very substantial reason." "Natalie, sweetheart," Patricia called out frantically from the front row, half rising from her seat. "What is wrong with you? What are you doing?" Natalie turned slowly to face her mother, her expression transforming into a mask of pure, razor-sharp ice. "Sit down, Mother. You are going to want to hear every single word of this." The word mother was delivered with such lethal, terrifying precision that Patricia collapsed back into the pew, as if struck physically. Natalie reached deep into the center of her bridal bouquet of white roses and withdrew a neat, thick stack of folded white papers, the printed copies of the journal entries she had hidden among the stems. Unfolding the top sheet, she turned back to face the 400 shocked faces staring up at her. "I want to express my deepest gratitude to every single person in this room for coming today," Natalie announced, her voice steady, powerful, and devoid of fear. 400 of you took valuable time out of your lives to witness what you believed was going to be a celebration of love, trust, and lifelong fidelity. You came here expecting to see 2 people pledge their hearts to one another in absolute truth. Robert stepped toward her, his face flushed with panic. "Natalie, stop this right now. Whatever insane misunderstanding this is, we can discuss it privately in the back. Please, let's just finish the ceremony." She raised her hand, shutting him down with a single, commanding gesture. No, Robert. We are going to discuss it right here, right now, in front of every single person who matters to us. Because everyone in this room deserves to know the absolute truth about the monsters they came to celebrate. The cathedral was so utterly silent that the faint hum of the air conditioning sounded like a roar. In the back rows, several guests stood up on their tiptoes, and a few discreetly lifted their smartphones to record the scene. Late last night, Natalie continued, reading directly from her printed pages, I discovered something that shattered my life into 1,000 pieces. I found a personal journal detailing a passionate, disgusting affair between the two people I trusted most in this world. Patricia's breath hitched loudly. Robert took another step back, his eyes wide with rising terror. This is a journal written by my mother, Patricia Williams, Natalie proclaimed, her voice echoing off the stained glass windows, documenting her month-long sexual affair with my fiancé, Robert Coleman. A massive, unanimous gasp erupted across the sanctuary. Pandemonium broke out in the pews, people turning to stare at Patricia, then at Robert, then back to Natalie in utter disbelief. That is a complete and utter lie. Robert shouted, his voice cracking with desperation. Natalie is having some kind of mental breakdown. She's out of her mind. Am I? Natalie said calmly, unfolding the second sheet of paper. Let me read an entry from March 15th, written in my mother's unmistakable handwriting, he kissed me today. I know it is wrong, but Robert makes me feel alive again in ways I haven't felt since Natalie's father left. The way he looked at me when she went to the restroom at dinner. I think he wants this too. The sanctuary erupted into loud, chaotic murmurs. Patricia's face had gone ghost white, her hands gripping the wooden edge of the pew ahead of her so tightly her knuckles were blue. Robert stood frozen at the altar, stripped of all his confidence, completely speechless. Let's move on to March 22nd. Natalie continued, her voice rising in power over the roaring crowd. We almost got caught today. Natalie called while Robert was at my house helping me move furniture. I could barely speak while he kissed my neck from behind. The guilt is eating me alive, but I can't stop. He says he loves us both differently. Stop it. Natalie, please, I beg you, stop. Patricia sobbed from the front row, burying her face in her hands as the surrounding guests recoiled from her in horror. Why should I stop, Mother? Natalie demanded, looking down at her weeping mother with cold disdain. You certainly didn't stop when you were sleeping with my future husband on the living room couch, where I opened my Christmas presents. You didn't stop last night, when you met him for one last time, while I was out celebrating my bachelorette party. Natalie turned to Robert's parents, who were sitting in the second row, frozen in absolute horror and shame. Here is an entry from May 3rd, written specifically about your son, Mr. and Mrs. Coleman, Natalie said, pointing to the paper. Robert says he wants to call off the wedding. He wants to be with me instead. He says what we have is real love, not the comfortable relationship he has with Natalie. Robert buried his face in his trembling hands, slumping against the altar railing as his own best man stepped away from him in total disgust. Natalie gathered the rest of the printed sheets and handed them directly to the stunned, speechless Reverend Williams. Here are the complete, printed records of their affair, Reverend. Feel free to pass them around to the rest of the guests so everyone can read the details for themselves. Turning back to the altar, Natalie unclasped her grandmother's silver sapphire bracelet from her wrist. She walked over to where her mother sat weeping, dropped the heirloom directly into Patricia's lap, and looked down at her one final time. You can keep your bracelet, Mom, Natalie said quietly, her voice cutting through the chaotic noise of the room. And you can keep Robert, too. You two completely deserve each other. With absolute grace, Natalie lifted the long train of her pristine white wedding gown, turned her back on the altar, on her mother, and on her ruined marriage, and walked down the center aisle with her head held high. The 400 guests parted like the Red Sea, watching in stunned, breathless awe as Natalie Williams walked out of the cathedral doors, stepping into the bright, beautiful sunshine of her brand new life. "Stop," Patricia whispered, but her voice was lost entirely in the growing chaos of the congregation. April 5th, Natalie's voice rang out, clear and uncompromising. "Robert told me he's having second thoughts about the wedding. He says, what we have is real love, not the comfortable relationship he has with Natalie." Jessica had moved closer to the altar, her face a mask of horror and disbelief, while the other bridesmaids stood frozen nearby, caught between wanting to comfort Natalie and wanting to flee the scene altogether. April 12th, Natalie continued, her tone cutting through the ambient noise like a sharpened blade. "We made love today. Real, passionate love. Nothing like the mechanical intimacy I had with Natalie's father. Robert says Natalie doesn't understand him the way I do." Suddenly breaking from his stupor, Robert lunged forward, trying frantically to grab the papers from her hands. "Stop this. You're destroying everything." Natalie stepped agilely out of his reach, her voice rising to meet his desperate advance. "I'm destroying everything. I am not the one who spent months betraying the person I claim to love." Minister Williams finally found his voice, stepping between them with a look of sheer distress. "Perhaps we should take a break and discuss this privately in the back room." "No," Natalie said firmly, holding her ground. "Everyone here came to witness the truth about our relationship. They deserve to hear it all." She turned her icy gaze directly toward her mother, who was now weeping silently in the front row. "May 3rd, Robert says he wants to call off the wedding. He wants to be with me instead. I'm 52 years old and I never thought I could feel this way again, but I keep thinking about Natalie's face when she talks about their future." The congregation was in complete, unbridled chaos now. Guests stood up in pews, talking loudly to one another, some headed straight toward the rear exits, while others surged closer down the center aisle to get an unobstructed view of the drama unfolding at the altar. May 17th, Natalie continued, her voice effortlessly carrying over the rising din. "Yesterday's entry, tomorrow is the wedding. Robert and I agreed this has to end after tomorrow. We'll have one last night together tonight. Then we'll try to make Natalie happy." She turned her body to face Robert directly, her eyes piercing through his composure. "Last night, while I was having dinner with my bridesmaids, celebrating what I thought was my final night as a single woman, you were with my mother, having one last night together." Robert's confident facade finally cracked completely. "Natalie, please. I love you. What Patricia and I had, it was a mistake. It meant nothing. It meant nothing." Patricia stood up, her face utterly ruined with tears and smeared mascara. "You told me you loved me. You said what we had was real love. Patricia, don't." "Don't what?" "Don't tell the truth," Patricia shouted, her voice trembling with betrayal. "You're the one who said Natalie was too practical, too boring. You said I understood your passion." Now the betrayers were turning on each other, exactly as the bitter truth demanded. Natalie stood back, watching months of covert secrets and calculated lies spill out in front of 400 stunned witnesses. "You used me," Patricia continued, her voice breaking into sob-racked gasps. "You made me believe you loved me, and now you're calling it nothing. I never said I would actually leave Natalie for you." Robert spat back, his face turning red under the sanctuary lights. "Yes, you did. On May 3rd, you said you wanted to call off the wedding entirely." The congregation watched in transfixed silence, as the mother and the fiancé tore each other apart with their own words. People recorded the spectacle on their smartphones, while others quietly gathered their coats and slipped away, unable to watch the brutal emotional carnage any longer. Natalie stood at the center of the storm, still holding her white floral bouquet, still clad in her gown. She felt remarkably, strangely calm, watching the two people she had trusted most lay bare their true characters to the world. Natalie, Jessica approached cautiously, moving as if trying not to startle a wounded animal. Let's go. Let's get you out of here right now. Not yet, Natalie said quietly, her eyes fixed forward. I'm not finished. She turned back to face the pews, where many guests remained rooted to their seats, mesmerized by the collapse of the union. I want everyone here to understand something clearly. This wasn't a brief moment of weakness. This wasn't a single, foolish mistake. This was a calculated betrayal that went on for months, while they both helped me plan this ceremony. She gestured broadly toward the floral arrangements, the delicate aisle candles, and the lavish decorations lining the church. My mother insisted on being involved in every single detail, every vendor meeting, every dress fitting, every minor decision. She was so eager to help, so excited about the wedding. Now I know why. Patricia was sobbing openly now, her carefully styled updo disheveled, her makeup utterly ruined. Natalie, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I never meant for this to happen. You never meant to get caught, Natalie corrected her with absolute precision. There is a vast difference. Robert made one last attempt to bridge the gap between them, taking a slow step forward. Natalie, please, we can work through this. What Patricia and I had is over. I want to marry you. I love you. You love me. Natalie laughed, a cold, sudden sound that echoed off the high stone arches. You spent last night making love to my mother, and you want me to believe you love me. She turned to address the remaining crowd one final time. I want to thank all of you for being here today. You came to witness a wedding, and instead, you got to see the absolute truth about the people I trusted most in the world. Consider it a different kind of ceremony, the death of lies instead of the birth of a marriage. She turned on her heel and walked up to the altar where Minister Williams still stood in shock, his service book forgotten in his limp hands. Reverend, I believe you can officially declare the ceremony concluded. With that, Natalie Williams walked down the aisle of St. Catherine's Church for the second time that afternoon. But this time, instead of stepping toward a future constructed on deception, she walked toward her own liberation. Behind her, she could hear Patricia calling her name in ragged sobs, Robert shouting desperate explanations that fell on deaf ears, and hundreds of guests buzzing in shock over the scandal. She pushed through the heavy oak doors into the bright afternoon sunlight, her dress trailing behind her. She was no longer a bride, she was a woman who had finally reclaimed control of her destiny. The parking lot was already erupting into chaos as guests filtered out into the fresh air, their voices carrying across the pavement in hurried, incredulous whispers. People fumbled with their phones to share the drama, while small groups gathered in circles, breaking down every second of the confrontation. Natalie stood on the top step, her gown fluttering in the breeze, watching the aftermath with a strange, hurricane-eye composure. Jessica ran out behind her, slightly out of breath. Are you okay? What can I do right now? I'm fine. Better than fine, actually. That was. I can't even process what just happened in there, Jessica said, her hands trembling. Is all of it really true? Natalie handed her the remaining sheaf of printed journal pages. Every single word. I found her diary late last night in her car. Jessica scanned the lines, her expression souring into deep horror. Oh my God, your own mother. How could she do something like this to you? I've been asking myself that all night. Rebecca and Amanda joined them on the steps, looking entirely shell-shocked. We are so incredibly sorry, Nat, Amanda offered gently. We had no idea. None of us did. No one did, Natalie replied. They were remarkably careful. From inside the vestibule, raised voices echoed out, Patricia and Robert were still inside, engaged in a bitter argument with each other and the bewildered coordinator. Natalie felt zero desire to hear their excuses. Where do you want to go? Jessica asked. Back to the hotel room. No. I never want to set foot in that room again. I need to get my personal belongings and leave town. Leave town? Today? As soon as possible. I can't stay here while everyone gossips about what happened. I need space to breathe. Her boss, Mrs. Chin, walked up cautiously alongside her husband. Natalie. I am so desperately sorry about what occurred in there. If you need extended leave from the firm, take whatever time you require. Thank you, Mrs. Chin. I'll likely need to request a permanent transfer to another regional office. Of course. Whatever you need, we'll facilitate it. You are one of our finest managers. A dark sedan pulled up to the curb nearby, and Robert's brother, Michael, stepped out looking utterly drained. His tuxedo tie was loosened, his hair messy. Natalie, please. I need to talk to you for a second. Jessica immediately stepped in front of her. She doesn't owe you or your family a single word, Michael. I know. Michael raised his hands defensively. I need her to know that I had no idea what was happening. None of us did. If you had known, Natalie asked, looking at him directly, what would you have done? Michael ran a hand over his face. I want to say I would have stopped him immediately, but I honestly don't know. He's my brother, but what he did to you is entirely unforgivable. My parents are inside in tears. They loved you like a daughter. I loved them too, Natalie said softly. But that doesn't change reality. At that moment, Robert burst through the front doors, his tuxedo jacket rumpled and his eyes red. Seeing Natalie, he started moving toward her. Natalie, wait. Please, just let me explain. There is nothing left to explain, Robert. I heard everything. What Patricia and I had, it wasn't real. He pleaded, reaching out. It was just a midlife crisis, or cold feet before the wedding. It didn't mean anything. It meant something to her, Natalie countered coldly. And it certainly should have meant something to you. You threw away 4 years of our life together for sex with my mother. The lingering guests in the lot went completely silent, watching the exchange with rapt attention. Robert realized they were making a scene and lowered his tone. I made a terrible mistake. A massive mistake. But I love you. We can work through this. Work through this. Natalie stared at him in utter disbelief. You had an affair with my mother for months while we planned a life together. There is no working through that. You didn't just break my trust, you obliterated my entire family structure. Patricia appeared in the doorway behind him, looking frail, wrinkled, and entirely stripped of her composure. Natalie, please don't walk away like this. Let's just talk. Talk about what, Mom? About how you fell in love with my fiancé. About how you helped me pick out a dress while dreaming of taking my place. What is there left to say? I want to apologize. I want to fix this. You can't fix this. You destroyed us. Patricia broke down into fresh sobs. You're my daughter. I love you more than life itself. If you loved me, you wouldn't have slept with my fiancé. If you loved me, you wouldn't have let me put on this dress today. I was going to tell you after the honeymoon. Patricia cried out. I was going to confess everything and beg for your forgiveness. After the honeymoon. Natalie repeated, horrified. You were going to let me marry him, go on a trip with him, start a household, and then tell me. How is that love? Patricia had no answer. She stood on the threshold, completely defeated. Mrs. Henderson, the coordinator, stepped out nervously with her clipboard. What should we do regarding the reception at the plaza? 400 guests are expected in 2 hours. Cancel it, Natalie said without hesitation. Tell them to donate the catered food to a local shelter. Let something good come out of this disaster. Turning away, Natalie walked toward Jessica's car. As they pulled out of the parking lot, she took one final look back at St. Catherine's. Robert and Patricia were still standing on the stone steps, surrounded by the wreckage of their own making. Natalie was done picking up the pieces of other people's sins. 6 months later, Natalie stood by the high window of her new apartment in Portland, Oregon, watching the gray rain slide down the glass pane. The West Coast was 1,000 miles away from the life she had dismantled, and the physical distance felt necessary. She had transferred offices, packed her car with her essential belongings, and left without looking back. Her living space was modest but bright, decorated simply with a comfortable sofa, a small dining set, and shelves lined with books she finally had time to enjoy. Everything in the space was chosen entirely by her, free from the manipulation of her past. Her phone vibrated on the counter. During her first month in Portland, Patricia and Robert had flooded her inbox with voicemail messages and long emails pleading for contact. She had systematically blocked their numbers and accounts. Healing, she realized, did not require giving betrayers an audience. The text was from Jessica. "How is Portland today? Still enjoying the new role?" Natalie typed back, "Loving it. The team is great, the work is challenging, and life is blissfully quiet." Her doorbell rang, startling her slightly. Looking through the peephole, she saw a delivery driver holding a vibrant arrangement of wildflowers. She opened the door carefully. "Natalie Williams." "Yes. These are for you." Accepting the bouquet, her heart sank slightly as she checked the card, bracing herself for another unwanted plea from back home. But the note read, "Welcome to the building. From your upstairs neighbor, Nathan in 3B." She smiled faintly, looking up toward the ceiling. An hour later, wanting to express her thanks, she walked up to the 3rd floor and knocked on door 3B. The door was opened by a man roughly her age with kind eyes, wearing jeans and a sweater dusted lightly with flour. "You must be Natalie from 2B. I'm Nathan Reed." "I am." "Thank you so much for the flowers, Nathan. That was incredibly kind, though you certainly didn't have to." "I just wanted to welcome you," he said with an easy smile. "Moving across the country can be lonely. I was actually in the middle of baking bread. Would you like a warm loaf?" Natalie hesitated briefly, her old defenses flaring up, but the complete lack of pretense in his demeanor eased her mind. "Actually, that sounds wonderful." Stepping inside, she noted his apartment was warm, filled with graphic design prints, and the rich scent of yeast and fresh crust. As he wrapped a loaf in a clean towel, they struck up a casual conversation about the neighborhood, local coffee shops, and the Pacific Northwest weather. Nathan was thoughtful, funny, and entirely unpushy. Over the following weeks, a quiet, effortless friendship bloomed between them. They exchanged occasional morning coffees, bumped into each other in the laundry room, and shared low-key conversations on the rooftop deck. Nathan never pried into her background, allowing her to share details only when she felt comfortable. Eventually, on a clear evening overlooking the city lights, she shared the general truth of why she had relocated. "The two people I trusted most in the world betrayed me in the worst way imaginable," she explained softly. Nathan listened quietly before replying, "I'm really sorry that happened to you, Natalie. But you shouldn't have to carry the weight of their horrible choices around forever." The simplicity of his words resonated deeply within her. By February, as winter settled over the city, Natalie felt more grounded than she had in years. One rainy evening while sharing pizza with Nathan in her apartment, her phone rang from an unknown, unblocked number. Sensing something important, she answered. "Hello, Natalie, it's your mother." Natalie's posture stiffened instantly. Nathan noticed the change in her demeanor, and quietly stepped into the kitchen to give her space. "How did you get this number?" Natalie asked coldly. "Jessica gave it to me, please don't hang up. I just need 5 minutes. I have nothing to say to you." Then just listen, please, Patricia begged, her voice sounding thin, old, and weary. I'm not calling to ask for forgiveness. I know I don't deserve it. I need you to know that it's over. Robert and I tried to stay together after the wedding to justify what we did, but it was a nightmare. We couldn't stand the sight of each other. He moved away months ago, and we will never speak again. Natalie listened, feeling a surprising sense of total detachment. The news caused no anger, no satisfaction, just a vast, quiet neutrality. I've been in therapy since September, Patricia continued, her voice trembling. Trying to understand how I could destroy my own child's life. I was terrified of aging, terrified of being alone after your father left, and when Robert gave me attention, I used it to feel validated. It was the most monstrous mistake of my life. I know it's too late for us, but I needed you to know that I am deeply, profoundly sorry. After a long pause, Natalie spoke calmly. I'm glad you're getting professional help, Mom. But you're right. It is too late for us. Goodbye. She ended the call and set the phone face down on the table. Nathan walked back into the living room and sat beside her on the couch, offering a quiet, supportive presence without pressing for details. Are you all right? He asked gently. I think so, Natalie realized, leaning back against the cushions. I feel clean. Like the past finally belongs to the past. Nathan looked at her warmly. I know you're still healing, Natalie. But whenever you feel ready for something new, I'd really like to take you out on a real date. No pressure, no rush. Just whenever you're ready. Natalie looked at his honest, patient face and felt a genuine sense of warmth bloom in her chest. For the first time since that terrible night in her mother's car, the future didn't feel like a threat, it felt like a promise. I'd really like that, Nathan, she said with a soft, genuine smile. I think I'm finally ready. Through the peephole, she could see a woman in her 50s holding a large, thick envelope. Natalie didn't recognize her, but something about the woman's nervous, hesitant posture made her open the door with the security chain still firmly attached. Are you Natalie Williams? The woman asked, her voice tight with restraint. Yes, I am, Natalie replied cautiously. I'm Sarah Mitchell. I was Robert Coleman's sister-in-law, his brother Michael's wife. Natalie's heart rate spiked slightly, though she felt a strange, quiet curiosity rather than any intense distress. Over the past year, she had occasionally wondered what became of Robert's family after the absolute devastation at the altar. What can I do for you, Sarah? Could I talk to you for a few minutes? Sarah asked quietly. I drove up all the way from California. I have something I think you really should see. After a brief moment of hesitation, Natalie unlatched the chain and stepped aside to let her in. Sarah entered the bright space, looking around appreciatively. This is lovely, Natalie. You've built a genuinely peaceful life here. Thank you, Natalie said, pointing toward the couch. What brings you all the way to Portland? Sarah sat on the edge of the cushion and unsealed the heavy envelope. Robert died 3 weeks ago. The words hit Natalie like a sudden, physical blow, though she couldn't quite fathom why. She hadn't loved Robert for well over a year, and she had barely spent a fleeting thought on him in months. Yet hearing that he was gone forever felt utterly surreal. What happened? A car accident, Sarah explained, her tone matter-of-fact yet filled with a gentle kindness. He was living in Phoenix, working construction. He'd been drinking heavily. I'm certainly not here to make you feel guilty or sad about it, Natalie. I know what he did to you was entirely unforgivable. Then why are you here? Sarah pulled a folded letter from the envelope. He explicitly asked me to give this to you if anything ever happened to him. I didn't want to just stick it in the mail. I felt like it was something that deserved to be delivered in person. Natalie stared down at the crisp paper, her name written across the front in Robert's familiar handwriting. "I don't know if I want to read it, Sarah." "You don't have to," Sarah offered softly. "But I think you should know that he was genuinely, deeply remorseful for what he did. He talked about you constantly, about how much he regretted destroying your trust." "He had a very bizarre way of showing regret," Natalie remarked bitterly. "He got together with my mother immediately after the wedding collapse. That lasted about 3 chaotic months before they had a massive blowout and went completely silent. Robert told Michael that those 3 months were the absolute worst period of his entire life," Sarah said. "He said being with your mother made him realize with brutal clarity everything he had lost with you." Natalie accepted the letter, holding it without unfolding it. "How are Michael and the rest of the family holding up?" "We are doing okay. We are grieving Robert, but sadly, no one was surprised. He'd been spiraling ever since he moved to Phoenix, drinking too much, taking dangerous jobs, acting reckless. Michael believes he was intentionally punishing himself." "I'm so sorry for your family's loss," Natalie said gently. "I know you loved him despite his choices." "We did," Sarah sighed. "He was a good person who made an utterly catastrophic choice. It doesn't excuse a single thing he did, but it makes his end terribly sad rather than just infuriating." After Sarah departed, Natalie sat alone in her living room holding the sealed paper. Part of her wanted to toss it into the fireplace, but another part knew she would forever ponder what he had written. An hour later, Nathan knocked on her door. They had been officially dating for 3 months now, moving carefully and intentionally, building an enduring foundation of trust one open conversation at a time. "You look like you've seen a ghost," Nathan observed, stepping inside and settling close beside her on the sofa. Natalie explained Sarah's unexpected visit and showed him the letter. "I'm torn on whether I should open it." "What do you think will happen if you do?" Nathan asked gently. "I don't know. Maybe nothing at all. Maybe it brings back the lingering anger I've worked so hard to dissolve. Or maybe it provides the closure I never officially got." "I thought you felt you already had closure," Nathan noted thoughtfully. "Did you? Or did you simply decide to march forward without it?" Natalie pondered his words. It was true that she had never received direct answers as to why Robert had ruined 4 years of partnership for a sordid, temporary fling with her mother. "Will you stay right here beside me while I read it?" she asked. "Always," Nathan replied, taking her hand. With trembling fingers, Natalie unfolded the sheet. "Dear Natalie, if you are reading this, something has happened to me. I asked Sarah to ensure you received this because I need you to know the whole truth, even though it changes nothing. I loved you. I know that sounds absurd after what I did, but I loved you more than anyone else in my life. That is what made my actions with your mother so utterly destructive and confusing. Your mother pursued me, Natalie, not the other way around. I am not saying that to deflect blame or excuse myself. I made my own wretched choices, but she was relentless, and I was foolishly flattered by the attention. She made me feel thrilling and desired in a way our routine had stopped providing. We had gotten comfortable, you and I. We were planning practical logistics, building a stable life together. It was healthy and stable, everything I thought I wanted. But your mother represented something forbidden, passion, drama, the thrill of secrecy. I understand now that what I mistook for passion was just the cheap high of doing something wrong. The secrecy made it feel far more intense than it ever was. When we tried to actually be together after the wedding exploded, we had absolute zero. No shared values, no common interests, no foundation. I threw away the absolute best thing in my life for something that wasn't even real. By the time I grasped that truth, it was far too late to fix the damage. I don't expect your forgiveness. I will never forgive myself. I just need you to know that what happened was never about you not being enough. You were more than enough. You were everything. I was simply too selfish and foolish to value what I had. I hope with all my heart that you find joy. You deserve absolute love and loyalty. I am so sorry for everything. Robert. Natalie carefully refolded the letter and sat in absolute silence for several long minutes. Nathan waited beside her patiently, offering no unsolicited advice, simply offering his grounding presence. How are you feeling? He finally asked softly. Sad, Natalie murmured. Not necessarily for him, but for the sheer waste of it all. Do you think he was being honest about your mother initiating it? Probably, Natalie admitted. That aligns with her need for validation. And as for him loving me, maybe he believed he did in his own flawed way. But does it even matter now? Natalie considered her own question deeply. Did it matter anymore? She had forged a fresh identity, found genuine love, and learned to open her heart again. She was happier than she had ever been, more independent, more self-assured, more protective of her boundaries, yet entirely unclosed to affection. No, she stated with absolute conviction. It really doesn't matter now. I'm glad I read it, but it doesn't alter how I view the past. It feels like something that happened to a completely different person, a version of me I used to be. Nathan smiled softly, pulling her into a warm embrace. Well, I happen to adore who you are right now. So do I, she whispered back. 3 months later, Nathan proposed to her on the rooftop deck of their apartment building, with the mountain peaks catching the sunset, and the city lights glowing beneath them. It was low-key, private, and deeply meaningful, just the two of them promising to construct a genuine future together. Natalie accepted without a second of doubt. This time, she recognized precisely what healthy love felt like. 2 years after the wedding that shattered her former world, Natalie stood before a mirror in a small dressing room, preparing for an entirely different kind of celebration. Instead of a heavy, elaborate white ball gown, she wore a simple, elegant cream dress that fell softly past her knees. Instead of a long lace veil, delicate fresh blossoms were woven through her hair. And instead of 400 onlookers, there were 12 cherished people waiting outside. Jessica stood behind her, carefully adjusting the floral accents. You look utterly luminous, National genuinely happy. I am happy, Natalie replied, looking at her reflection. Completely and thoroughly happy. It's night and day compared to 2 years ago, Jessica said softly. You were beautiful back then, but it looked like you were performing a role. Today, you look entirely like yourself. Natalie smiled at her friend's sharp observation. 2 years ago, she had played the role of the blushing bride in a magnificent dress, marching toward a grand lie. Today, she stood as a woman who was grounded, confident, and deeply at peace. The venue was the lush backyard of Nathan's parents' home in the hills outside Portland. They had adorned the grounds simply with warm string lights and native wildflowers, creating an intimate setting that felt authentic and personal. The ceremony was to be officiated by Nathan's uncle, a retired judge who had known Nathan his entire life. Are you experiencing any nerves? Jessica inquired. Not a single bit, Natalie said with complete ease. I know exactly who I am marrying, and I know why I am making this commitment. The contrast was profound. 2 years ago, she had been swept up in an anxious whirlwind she hadn't fully understood, a gut feeling trying desperately to warn her that her life was built on sand. Today, she felt nothing short of calm, absolute certainty. Nathan's mother, Carol, knocked gently on the doorframe. The groom is ready whenever you are, dear. Nathan had asked his brother and 2 lifelong friends to stand beside him, while Natalie had chosen Jessica and Rebecca as her attendants. Amanda, who now resided across the country, had sent a tears of joy video message that they had watched earlier that morning. How is Nathan holding up? Natalie asked with a smile. Carol beamed. He keeps declaring that he's the luckiest guy alive. He isn't nervous either, he looks like a man who just inherited the universe. The small group of guests were gathered in a semicircle of white chairs facing a simple wooden arch wrapped in climbing roses. Nathan's parents, his brother and sister-in-law, Jessica and her partner, Rebecca and her husband, 3 close colleagues from Natalie's firm, and her supportive boss, Mrs. Chin, made up the entire gathering. No one from her past life was present. She had briefly contemplated inviting a few distant relatives, but ultimately decided this day belonged entirely to her present and future, unburdened by past baggage. Everyone in attendance cherished the woman she had become. As she stepped out through the back patio, a wave of profound gratitude washed over Natalie. 2 years prior, she had felt her world was coming to an end, humiliated, broken, and betrayed. She could never have predicted that the most painful day of her existence would serve as the catalyst for her greatest joy. The late afternoon sun cast a warm, amber glow across the manicured lawn. The small gathering turned, their faces radiant with affection. But it was Nathan's expression that made her heart soar. Standing beneath the rose arch in a tailored navy suit, his face lit up with pure, unadulterated joy the moment his eyes met hers. There was no shadow of doubt in his gaze, no hidden agenda, no dark secrets waiting in the wings, only transparent, steady, unwavering love. She walked toward him with a light step, holding a simple bouquet of wildflowers. There was no booming pipe organ, no rigid march, just a woman walking toward the man she trusted with her whole heart. "You look stunning," Nathan whispered as she joined him. "So do you," she replied softly. Uncle Jim smiled warmly at the couple. "We are assembled here today to celebrate the union of Nathan and Natalie, 2 individuals who have discovered in one another a true partner, someone who sees them clearly, honors them fully, and chooses them every single day." The ceremony was concise and deeply personal. Instead of standard vows, they shared handwritten promises. Nathan spoke first, his voice steady and resolute. "Natalie, 2 years ago, you moved into the space below mine, and you transformed my world in ways I could never have anticipated. You taught me that true love doesn't require drama or pretense to be powerful. You proved that the best relationships are anchored in simple honesty, deep friendship, and choosing each other consistently. I promise to always offer you absolute truth, to support your dreams unconditionally, to be your safe harbor, and to cherish you, not despite the trials you've endured, but because of the incredible, resilient woman those trials shaped you to be." Tears glistened in Natalie's eyes, tears of pure joy. "Nathan," she began, her voice ringing clear. "You demonstrated to me what authentic love actually looks like. Not the frantic, dramatic thrill found in fiction, but the steady, enduring quiet that makes a person feel completely safe, understood, and valued. You never attempted to fix me or hurry my healing. You simply loved me as I was and allowed me the space to rebuild my life. I promise to trust you entirely, to communicate with complete transparency, and to build a life alongside you, not out of a need for completion, but out of a deep desire to share my life with yours." Uncle Jim pronounced them husband and wife, and Nathan drew her into a tender kiss, as their loved ones cheered. It bore zero resemblance to the lavish spectacle she had planned 2 years ago, yet it possessed everything she had ever truly desired: authenticity, intimacy, truth, and real affection. The reception was a relaxed backyard gathering featuring a playlist Nathan had compiled of songs meaningful to their journey. They danced on the wooden deck as dusk settled over the mountains, surrounded by the laughter of people who genuinely cared for them. "Any lingering regrets?" Nathan asked gently, as they swayed together under the glowing lights. "Regrets about what, my husband? About not having the massive cathedral, the huge dress, or the elaborate fanfare?" Natalie looked around at the warm scene, at Jessica laughing with Nathan's brother, at Mrs. Chin chatting happily with Carol, at the quiet mountain backdrop, and finally into the eyes of the man holding her close. "This is precisely what I wanted," she said softly. "I just didn't understand the difference 2 years ago." "What was the difference?" "I thought I wanted a magnificent wedding, Natalie realized. When what I actually needed was a magnificent marriage. As the night wound down and guests slowly began to depart, Natalie stood on the edge of the deck, taking in the cool night air. Nathan wrapped his arms around her waist from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. "What are you contemplating?" he murmured. "Just how profoundly everything has shifted," she replied. 2 years ago, I believed my life was ruined. I thought I would never trust anyone again, never love again. And now I realize that sometimes the worst event of your life is simply the doorway to the best chapter of your life. If I hadn't been betrayed, I never would have come to Portland. I never would have met you. I never would have experienced what true love actually feels like. Do you ever wonder what life would have been like if you had married him?" Natalie thought for a moment before answering honestly. "I would have been miserable eventually. We weren't right for each other. I was trying to mold him into an ideal, and I was compromising myself to fit his expectations. It was bound to break." "I'm glad it broke," Nathan said softly. "So am I." They stood together in comfortable silence under the stars. Tomorrow, they were boarding a flight to Italy for 2 weeks along the Amalfi Coast, exploring, celebrating, and making lasting memories. But in this quiet moment on an Oregon deck, newly married, Natalie felt completely fulfilled. "Mrs. Reed," Nathan tested the name softly against her ear. "I really love the sound of that." "I love you, Nathan." "I love you too, Natalie." Stepping back inside to join their family, Natalie felt an overwhelming sense of wholeness. It wasn't the anxious, uncertain feeling of her past, but a secure, quiet strength that illuminated everything ahead. She had learned that betrayal can shatter a life, but it can also grant absolute freedom. She had learned that while the people closest to you can inflict the deepest wounds, it doesn't mean you must close yourself off from the world forever. Sometimes, the day your old world falls apart is simply the very first day of your real life. And standing beside Nathan, surrounded by warmth and truth, Natalie knew she was finally right where she belonged.